Hello Year 7, it's Mr. Lightfoot. We are now going to move on to percentages. Okay, so we've done fractions, we've done ratios, we're now on to percentages, okay? For this lesson, we're going to find out how to write one quantity as a percentage of another quantity. In order to do that, we're going to have to remember how to create equivalent fractions. Okay, so before I start, there are some starter questions on creating equivalent fractions. Could you answer them? Pause the video and I'll go through the answers in a second. Fantastic. Hopefully that's what you've got. For those of you that have forgotten how to create an equivalent fraction, let's take this one. I can create an equivalent fraction by looking about how I've got from the 3 to the 9. I multiply by 3. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top. 3 multiplied by 3 gives you 9, and 1 multiplied by 3 gives you 3. So I've created an equivalent fraction. Remember that an equivalent fraction has the same value. Okay, so 1/3 is equivalent to 3/9. Okay, and in order to complete this lesson, that's all we're going to do, is we're going to create equivalent fractions, okay? In fact, we're going to create equivalent fractions that look like this. Okay, good. So going through the answers, that's what you should have got. Hopefully you all got that. Let's move on. Okay, again, there is a big question. Okay, Jerry took 60 bottles to a bottle bank. 27 of the bottles were green. What percentage of the bottles were green? Okay, so essentially our job this lesson is to create or take a fraction, any fraction, and change it into a percentage. Okay, that's our job this lesson. Looks incredibly difficult, but believe me, it isn't. Okay, so our job is to take any fraction and change it to an equivalent percentage. Okay, so feel free to pause the video, give this a go if you want. We'll go through the answers at the end. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to start off with some quite easy problems. We're then going to move on to some interesting problems, and we're going to get into using calculators actually towards the end of this. So if we start off, change 11 out of 20 to a percentage. Okay, so we've gone through percentages before. Just as a reminder, this is what percentage means. It means out of 100. Okay, so a percentage is simply a fraction with a denominator out of 100. Okay, that's all it is. So if you see a fraction out of 100, we can convert that straight away to a percentage. So for example, if this fraction is 7 out of 100, then the percentage will be 7%. Okay, so bear that in mind, write it down if you want. Percentage means out of 100. So my goal is to change a fraction to a percentage. So 11 out of 20 as a fraction looks like that, and my only job in these type of questions is to get that denominator to 100. Okay, luckily 20 is a nice number. I can quite easily get that to 100. If I multiply 20 by 5, I get 100. If I do the same to the top, I get 55. Okay, now once my fraction is out of 100, that becomes my percentage. So 11 out of 20 is 55%. Similarly, 14 out of 50. My only job is to get that denominator to 100. Clearly, if I multiply by 2 to the bottom, 50 multiplied by 2 is 100. Do the same to the top, I get 28. 14 out of 50 as a percentage is 28%. Nothing too difficult about that. Okay, so if the denominators are nice, our job's quite easy. In other words, if the denominators are factors of 100, it's very straightforward to change to a percentage. Okay, sometimes the denominators are not factors of 100, and we've got to maybe complete a couple of steps or think a bit more difficult about the question. Okay, so again, my only goal is to get this number to 100, but I know that getting 40 to 100 is not straightforward. It's not straightforward at all, okay, because I can't multiply 40 by a whole number, an integer, to get it to 100. I can multiply by a decimal, but I can't multiply it by a whole number, okay? So I've got to think about how I'm going to do this. Now, the easiest way is to think about the multiples of 40. If I wrote down the multiples of 40, okay, I'd get to 200. So I know that I can get 40 to 200, and I know certainly that I can get 200 to 100. Okay, I don't have to get it to 200, I can get it to 400. But in this case, I'm going to get it to 200. So 40 multiplied by something is 200. Good. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top. Okay, and already that's an interesting number. I have to think about this. That's an interesting number. 23 multiplied by 5 is 115. Okay, so looking at how I get from 200 to 100, I've now got to divide that number by 2. Hopefully we can all do that if we use the bus stop. 115 divided by 2. We can all do that type of maths. Okay, we're going to get a decimal because, well, let's face it, that's an odd number. Okay, so if I divide that by 2, I'm going to get 57.5. If I can write this properly. Okay, so bit of an interesting number. It's a decimal, not technically a fraction, but I said to you that a percentage is just a number out of 100. So 23 out of 40 as a percentage is 57.5%. There's lots of ways of creating equivalent fractions. As I said to you before, I could have got this to 400 and then divided by 4, but the numbers get bigger. Okay, so I try to keep the numbers as small as possible. Now, looking at this problem, hopefully we can all see that I can get this number to 100 straight away by dividing by 4. If I divide by 4, I divide the top number by 4, the numerator. Thankfully, 80 is a very nice number. I get 20. So 80 out of 400 is 20%. Okay, straightforward. There may be intermediate steps. There may be steps in which we've got to think about. Shockingly, we might have to do some maths. Okay, but we can arrive at the answer. Now, if the denominators are relatively straightforward, 9 times out of 10, it'll be non-calculator. Sometimes the denominators are a bit interesting. Okay, sometimes they're a bit interesting. Yeah, and we've got to think about how we're going to arrive at the answer. Now, again, if they are interesting questions, you're probably going to get a calculator, but before I just show you what to do, let's have a think about answering this question using a fraction, okay? If I can write this down, 4 out of 12, okay? Remember that my only goal is to get this to 100, okay? Now, getting 12 to 100 is quite difficult. So what I would do first is look at the fraction. 4 over 12 simplifies to a third. Okay, now I know that I can get that to 100 now because, well, if I think about this, if I do get that to 300, remember I'm just creating equivalent fractions. What I do to bottom, I do to top. As long as I'm doing the same, I'm allowed to do it. I can then get this to 100 by dividing by 3, can't I? I can get it to 100 by dividing by 3. If I divide by 3, divide by 3. Hopefully we can all, oh good lord, this mouse, divide this by 3. Yeah. If we did that, we're going to get 33.3 reoccurring. Okay, so I know that 4 over 12, if I write it there, 33.3 reoccurring, is 33.3 recurring percent. So this math, this question is quite easily doable using fractions. But we've got to understand fractions. We've got to be quite competent at using this kind of maths. Okay, so I can use a calculator. Okay, now have a look at what I've done here. Let's try and figure this out. 4 divided by 12. Well, that's just 4 over 12. Okay, and I've used a calculator. Look, a third. A third is 0.333333, so on. Okay, we've got to think about why we're timesing by 100 now. Okay, so let me show you and try and explain what I've done. I've simplified 4 over 12, 4 divided by 12, and got a third. Okay, and I said to you that my job is to get that number to 100. Okay, so essentially what we're trying to find, that's an x, is this number. So a third is something over 100. Now, the opposite of dividing by 100 is multiplying by 100. The inverse operation is multiplying by 100. So if I take my third and multiply it by 100, I'm going to get that. Okay, now a calculator will do all this for you. If I do 4 divided by 12, I'm going to get a third, or 0.3 reoccurring. I then multiply by 100 because I'm essentially doing the inverse operation and after this numerator. Okay, so 0.3 recurring multiplied by 100 is 33.3%, which is what we got here. Okay, so this maths is the same as this maths. It just seems a little more complicated to explain. But all I essentially do is just do 4 divided by 12 multiplied by 100, and it gives me the percentage. Okay, which means that this question is pretty straightforward to answer now. All I've got to do is 8 divided by 48 multiplied by 100. Yeah, and if I was to write that out as a fraction, 8 divided by 48 multiplied by 100. Okay, so this bit here gives me my decimal bit. This multiplying by 100 changes it to a percentage. Okay, so I could either use an equivalent fraction, but remember, when these numbers become interesting, it starts getting a bit difficult, or I could just use a calculator. Okay, and you'll see on the worksheet when you get it that exercise 1 is not using a calculator and exercise 2 is you using a calculator. Okay, so hopefully that makes kind of sense. There are some questions. I'd like you to have a go at these questions. Pause the video and have a think about how you're going to answer these questions. If I were you, I'd try and do these without a calculator and get an answer. Okay, so pause the video, give them a go. Brilliant. Okay, hopefully you've answered those. These are the answers that I got for the questions. If any of you are struggling, please send me an email and I'll explain them. However, we can take, if I just do an example there, G, 7 over 35. What does that equal? Is that a fifth? 1 over 5. So 35 divided by 7 is 5. So if I simplify 7 over 35, I'm going to get 1/5. Okay, and I can get that to 100 then by multiplying by 20. Okay, so without breaking too much of a sweat, 7 out of 35 as a percentage should be 20%. So if I go to G, 20%. Okay, good. Now, the next type of question, okay, if you look at these units are all the same. Pounds, pounds, kilograms, kilograms, kilometers, kilometers, meters, meters. The units are the same. Okay, you may get some questions where the units are different, and we've got to be careful here, because in order to work out a percentage, the units or the quantities must be the same. So these things here have got to be the same. Okay, so I've got to do some fancy maths in order to get them the same, or conversions. Okay, so hopefully we should know how many centimetres are in a metre. Yeah, so this question becomes this: 45 over 200, and we got to change that to a percentage. Okay, again, not intrinsically difficult. I could use a fraction, equivalent fraction to do this, or I could use a calculator. It doesn't matter which. Half of 45 is 22.5. So in this case, I used a fraction. So I changed from meters to centimeters because they've got to be the same. I then halved top and bottom, or divided by 2, and got 22.5%. Okay. I could do the same with this one. However, I hope you can appreciate, not that this is too difficult, that the bigger the number is, the more difficult it is. Hopefully we know that there are 2,000 grams in 2 kilograms. Okay, so I change kilograms to grams. Yeah, let's see if we can work this out. If I divide top and bottom by 10, I get 80 over 200. If I half top and bottom, I get 40 over 100. So the answer should be 40% if I've worked it out correctly. Oh, thankfully. Okay, so in this case I use the calculator. 800 divided by 2000 gives me 0.4. So this as a decimal gives me 0.4. And then I multiply by 100 to change it to a percentage. Okay, so I could use equivalent fractions, or I could use a calculator. But what I've got to make sure, and this is really important, that the quantities must be the same. I can't do 800 divided by 2 because the quantities are different and you'll get a silly answer. Okay, so make sure the quantities are the same. Okay, everything else, once they are the same, is just as normal. Okay, so you can see here that the quantities are different. Make sure you change the quantities. Okay, pause the video, give them a go, and I'll go through the answers. Excellent. Hopefully you did that. Hopefully you changed the units to the same units. You may have had to Google some of the conversions, maybe, or you may have known them, I don't know. So for example, here, 36 minutes to 60 minutes. Okay, 25 centimetres to 100 centimetres, that's an easy one. 800 metres to 1,000 metres, and so on. Okay, so these are the answers. Hopefully they're correct, they look correct. And to finish off, the big target question. Okay, I want you to think about how you would change this to a percentage. Okay, so pause the video, give it a go, see if you can do it using both methods. See if you can do it using equivalent fractions, and see if you can use it doing the calculator method. Excellent. Okay, calculator method is what I did, because I just did, I don't know why. 27 divided by 60 is 0.45. 0.45 times 100 is 45%. If you did use the equivalent fraction method, if I were you, I'd have got that to 600. I think 270. And then divided by 6, 6 into 270, if this works, 270 over 6, 45, yes it works, thankfully, it's 45, okay. So get the bottom number to 600 and then divide by 6 to get it to 100, which gives you 45%. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Remember that there are questions on MathsWatch, and there is, of course, the supplementary worksheet to work through. I'll say goodbye, take care, and we'll speak soon.